Kevin Alltucker to see.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start the meeting. Not sure we have enough for a quorum, but let's go ahead and do a roll call and see.
Kevin Alltucker. Shaylin Bays. Siobhan Cancel.
Here.
Sue Kutsu George.
Here.
Denise Diamond. Larissa Ennis. Mike Eister.
Here.
Austin Fulnagi. Lisa Fragola.
Present.
Will Gray. Charles Kimball. Zach Mulholland.
Here.
Steve Mattel.
Here.
Amber Patterson. Here. Ron Preisler.
Sue, if I may, I just received a text back from Kevin. He says he's on his way. So
Okay.
in terms of quorum, we should have one soon enough.
Okay, we don't quite yet, so. We can't take any action, but how about if we go ahead and,
We can't convene the meeting.
So,
without-
yeah,
Oh, you can't?
there's a question about whether or not we can convene a meeting without a quorum. Can I get a hand on that?
I thought we should. You can't.
That's right.
Okay.
But we can convene the meeting.
You can't adopt the agenda.
Right. We
No
can't
action at
adopt
all.
The agenda.
Right.
okay. Well, the first thing that happens is the land recognition, so maybe we could go ahead and do that.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so Amber's going to do the land recognition for us.
Okay.
I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Thank you, Amber.
Oh, there's.
Okay, so,
There's.
oh, excellent. Okay, do you need to redo anything with the roll call or?
Often the chair would just recognize the new
We'll just
people who
recognize them,
joined so
okay.
that they can be read into the record.
Okay, so we recognize that we have two more committee members, Ron Preisler and Larissa Ennis are here, which then gives us a quorum, I believe. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yay. Thank you for coming, everyone. It was touch and go there for a second. Okay, so the first item is adoption of the agenda and approval of the May 15th, 2024 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, excellent. Yeah. Go to this. So the next agenda item is public comment. Do we have any public comment?
Do we have any online?
No, we don't.
No public comment. Okay. All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bulger.
Thank you. And welcome everybody to the third budget committee meeting. We always appreciate your service to Lane Community College. Before I turn this over to Kara Flath, the Vice President of Finance and Operations, I just want to acknowledge that we had a big day yesterday. And this board in particular had a big day. And so just want to congratulate our colleague, friend, board member, Lisa Fragola, on your win yesterday. So thank you.
Thank you.
And now with that, I want to turn things over to Kara Flath. Kara?
Can you hear me okay? So we sent out your responses to your questions. I apologize for the lateness on it. We were working diligently, trying to get through a lot of questions, a lot of information, wanted to make sure that we covered things thoroughly. Because you probably didn't have a lot of time to look through the document. There is a copy at your seat if you would like to reference it. But I wanted to hit a few highlights that seem to be consistent budget highlights that go through the document. A couple of things, and I'm sure partially related to a lot of discussion about personnel budgeting. And we also brought in $1 million change to our personnel budget in our second iteration based on some comments from the budget committee, the first round. There was a lot of discussion and questions around vacancy savings and how that's captured. And I wanted to give you a few highlights that are applicable to the college. The first of which is our historical average for vacancy savings on positions is about 2.5% savings from year to year. There was a chart in there that shows from 2012 to 2023, because we're not finished with 2024, what that might look like. That came out at about 2.5% on average. The other item that I think is important is to note that at any point in the year, it seems the college has about 50 positions that are vacant. And with that, the time that it takes to fill it and things, attrition and things that happen, you do internal transfers, you do all that. There is that lag time. So that helps with the vacancy savings. So that's just perspective on how that might be calculated. I do also want to note a couple of things. One, for the budget committee, and the board, part of the purview is setting the operational budget standards for the college to make the operational decisions. So it's a lot of level of detail. I just want to make sure you have all the detail you need to make the decisions. So just giving you context on that. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So when you set a personnel budgeting number, it's a number we have to live within, and then we make all the operational decisions that allow us to stay within that budget. So keep that in mind as we go through a little more information and some of the information in the charts. So there's a couple of things that also lead into it. Some positions were, we fully funded all the positions in our budget document, and there's a couple that are intentionally not going to be filled until the beginning of January, and that's just strategically to provide an inclusive process. Some of it's the staggering time of having, not needing that position till then, and some of it's going to be needing that much time to get that position filled. The estimated savings in that is about $400,000. We also found, and kudos to our budget team because they do a fantastic job, but out of 600 positions, there was 2 that we had duplicated for a variety of reasons. That's about $300,000. So between the 2 of those, that's about $700,000 of the $1 million that we proposed. In addition, if any time 50 positions are vacant, right now there's 51 when we looked. It'll take probably October 1st would really be a good deadline for at least 25 to a third of those positions, 25% to 30%, because we are going into summer months and because we want to make sure everyone's involved in hiring processes and we go through all that. And some staff aren't on campus here, we will naturally see some more vacancies. And what we estimate to come from that is probably $350,000. Between those 3 buckets, when we bring in a budget and we're saying we believe we've given you a balanced budget, it's reasonable, what's sustainable. Those are some of the decisions that we make on the operational end. So just to give you context. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Some of the other thing that seemed to come up a lot, and we can talk about this, and Jonathan is on standby over here because he's great at explaining these analogies, is the reserve for revenue shortfall versus contingencies. And in 2024, the board had set reserve for revenue shortfall at the $4 million. We went through what that would look like, but that was specific. That was set with specific metrics by the board. This particular budget doesn't have as many unknowns as that particular budget did because the legislature has set the budget. We're on a very steady path. We believe the numbers that are set in the budget are pretty solid. They're pretty foundational. So we proposed, a slight change to add to the administrative contingencies because that allows the flexibility to move budget operationally as needed. And if the revenue isn't captured in the sense that we project as a revenue budget, then we won't ask for permission to use that. So those are the 2 key areas I saw in the document. Is there any other questions? Not to skip ahead. Yeah.
You talked about operational decisions.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, there's been confusion about the authority of various segments of the budget process to weigh in on personnel decisions. And sometimes that gets conflated with program decisions as well. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, and there's a list of the formal terms of it, and internally still learning all the nuances of the college. But as a general rule, whether it's a budget committee or a board, you all set budgets, policies for the college, the operational decisions that include personnel, FTE, and all of those level of decisions are done at the president's level and her cabinet members, and then succeeding line of what she establishes. That is a really short summary of how I would explain it.
Thanks.
So thank you for the information on the vacancy savings. Trying to get that term into my brain over this period of time. And so what happens to the vacancy savings at the end of the year? Does that just move over into the general fund? Or, I mean, it's because the way that it gets described is, you know, it comes in these increments based on not hiring people at certain times of the year, but there are these savings that happen. So what happens to that?
In essence, on a big picture, what it's going to do, depending on what your ending budget looks like at the end of the year, there may be, so for example, we'll bring in a resolution to the board that we have to move some things around operationally. It could be used for part of that. But as a general rule, what's going to happen is it will lead to a higher ending fund balance that will roll over into the next year.
So it kind of gets balanced out in the process when we get to the end of the fiscal year in terms of whether or not we have a shortfall for the next year.
Yes.
Okay.
So a question about that. When you have all those vacancies, do you sometimes have to use those savings to maybe hire temporary workers? So some of it actually gets used for that purpose rather than gets saved till the end of the year?
Yes, that's a really good question. And as Jonathan was talking about, when you look at the forecast and the burn rate of part-time faculty is way higher than others, that's part of what can happen, is especially if it's areas that we can't not have, especially faculty teaching classes, higher enrollment. So yes, that can absolutely happen.
So we wouldn't expect to have that 2%, 2.5% savings just show up at the end of the year fund balance. It could be used for other purposes.
Could be used for other purposes. And then I would also add, things can happen. Let's say there's a leak in the building and for some reason we didn't have any and money had to be diverted there. It could go to that too. And that would be something that would be brought in the balancing of the budget towards the end of the year to the board.
And that's all part of the administrative managing of the budget within the policy level parameters that we get from the budget committee and the board. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Had one
Go
more
ahead.
question. So, I appreciate the breakdown of, the duplicate positions and the original new added positions. So when this was described in the last meeting, I didn't realize that the additional 1 million that was being identified as, savings to the personnel budget was actually from vacancy savings. I thought it was saying we would simply not fill certain specific positions similar to what we've done in the past. So I am glad to hear that it's coming through vacancy savings, but what happens then if we are looking at this as a savings and then we fill the positions in terms of budgeting in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that is part of the long-term forecasting that we need to keep our eyes on, especially as we get through the year. And that's where I'd also say attrition is going to continue to happen through the year. And that's where those decisions are going to have to be made, because no one ever hopes to lay off positions. So then as attrition happens and things happen, you have to strategically look at, is this position or this position ones you have to fill? And when you have 50 positions vacant at any given time, that's where we will have that opportunity to make those operational decisions at the president's level.
Okay. Steve?
It's okay. Just, some of these questions are for my own curiosity. They don't really affect my thinking about, how to move forward with this year's budget. But the way I guess I'm thinking about vacancy savings is really the delay between, when the last person leaves, the previous person leaves the position, and the 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it takes to fill it. That's the savings that kind of goes back to the budget, I suppose, as well as whatever the difference in salary rate is between the person leaving and the new person. And that's perhaps how we should think of it. So we could ask you, for example, hey, it's one thing to tell us that we have 50 vacancies at any given time on average, and another thing on how long on average does it take us to fill them. And then we could rough out what the actual savings turns out to be that actually comes back into the budget as a result.
Yeah, good question. And you certainly could do that. And when it was looked at vacancy savings, it was, here's all the positions that we funded, here's how much we filled of them. So those rates that we provided in here will include that. And what also happens internally with the college that I'm learning is they do internal transfers too. So if I have an accounting position open and there's a possibility someone wants to internally transfer, has an accounting background, they can move over there, but that creates another vacancy over there, and then so on and so forth. So you do get, yeah, there is that lag time. And then maybe there's the possibility of, hey, I really have to evaluate this position and figure out within my unit, do I need that position here? Or maybe I need to make strategic decisions. So there's a variety.
People leave too, you don't plan on people quitting during the year, but that brings up vacancy savings because you don't plan that in your budget too. So.
Hey, Kevin.
Okay, we recognize Kevin, who's here. Thank you.
Apologies for being late.
That's okay. You're here. We appreciate it. Okay, anything else for Steve? You look like your hand's half up.
Well, where I was headed was, recognizing that I think there's 2 members of the committee who need to leave any moment now. And
Oh, okay.
right, I think that was their plan, right? That they were leaving at 5:30, and I think that's times 2, Siobhan and Zach. And I haven't actually counted what happens if those 2 depart. Do we have a quorum? We do.
Still do.
Okay, then,
I was gonna then say, well, maybe we should get this motion in now, but perhaps.
so here's what I was hoping to do. I wanted to go around the table and just get a sense from everybody how they were feeling about the budget. But let me start with Siobhan and Zach so that you can get your thoughts in before you head off to the city's budget process. And then I'll just start around the table, okay? Siobhan?
Yes, thank you for that. I read through the answers and I don't have any more questions at this time.
Thank you. Zach? Any thoughts or concerns?
No, it seems like a prudent document, and I'm supportive of it. And I'm hoping that hopefully with enrollment increases and as we lock down revenues in the fall, we can look at hiring these positions and increasing M&S as we should. And thanks for all of the great work that went into this budget.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go around. I'm going to start with Amber.
Sure.
You want to give us how you're feeling about
Yeah.
this budget?
I don't have any questions, just comments. I think, I feel comfortable approving the budget as is. I think you guys did a great work putting it together. I look at kind of 2 things high level is budget strategy. Were you conservative or aggressive with your revenue projections? It sounds like you were conservative. You're expecting hopeful for 5% and you're budgeted a 3.5%. I don't know what the delta is there, but that would be obviously in your favor. So that was well. Also, just the ability to pivot if things don't go as planned, which things never go as planned. So it does look like you have some ability in there with your vacancy savings. You have your 350 for revenue shortfall. I did go down a little rabbit hole of looking at vacancy savings because I was curious about it. It's always in our budget at work and private business. Like that's always where we get our savings. So I was curious for, public community colleges. The average seems to be about 1 to 5% of personnel costs. So your 2 to 4 million you have in there is right in line with that. I think I calculated 2 to 3%. So, you could always stagger or delay hiring on those if you get into a position where you need to. So in a perfect world, I would love you to have more support and have a better, a larger reserve. But in that perfect world, you get a lot more support from state funding, et cetera. Sorry if that's inappropriate, but it's reality. So with that, I just have one final thing to just watch out for. It's always easier said than done. But I do want to say it is when you are talking about positions and delaying, you guys are on like a really good upward trend, right? You look at your enrollment down, 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 and then in the last few years, you're moving upwards. So you're making momentum. Don't try not to delay those positions that keep you on that long-term path. It's so easy to focus on this year and hitting this budget, and we forget about the big picture, right? And so I look at some of those like director of communications, probably really important to keep on your upward momentum to have those. So again, easier said than done, but just keep that in your back pocket when you're evaluating those. So.
Thank you, Amber. Gonna go to Larissa.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to echo what Amber just said, which is really weighing the prudent savings that you will have with vacancy savings against the opportunity cost that is represented by holding those positions unfilled. But overall, I think this budget is prudent and I feel comfortable approving it.
Thank you. Ron, any comments, thoughts, concerns? Ron, you're muted. Are you there? Okay, well, we'll come back to him. Kevin, any?
Okay.
Oh, wait, okay.
Now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Most of the people here that I'm listening to are very concerned about people as well as I am. But I'm also concerned about infrastructure. Our budget seemed to ignore it for the past few years. And looking at it now, it doesn't appear that it would be sufficient for the next few years, especially with the cut in budget money from the state and other sources. My experience has been more of a local city level and a community level. And if you don't take care of your infrastructure now, 2 years from now, it's going to almost double the cost. So that's my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin?
Thank you. And again, apologies for being late. That's not something I like to do. For me, the budget strikes an appropriate balance between conservative and being overly optimistic. And the trend lines for the enrollments are up, which is fantastic. That's kind of like the lifeblood. I do have concerns about our facilities upgrades and maintenance. That's certainly an issue. I don't have any large concerns. Again, I'm comfortable with the budget, the way that it's been presented, because it does strike a fairly conservative enrollment estimate, and I appreciate that. And I know that President Bolger and her team and faculty and staff will do everything in their power to make sure that we exceed those enrollment forecasts. So I'm supportive of the budget.
Thank you. Steve?
I don't want to belabor the point. I don't have much to add to what's been said. Also, actually, I'll just stop there. I plan to support the budget.
Thank you. Mike?
The people who were paying attention to our budgeting process last year will remember that I was very concerned about our budget last year. It was very scary to me because I hadn't seen enough of a trend to give me confidence that that we could be as optimistic as I think we were. This year, I feel totally different. I feel like we are seeing a trend. I feel like President Bolger's leadership is taking hold and making a difference and an impact. There's a strong team at the college, and we've got great faculty and staff support. So I'm totally supportive of this budget.
Thank you. Lisa?
Yes, I'm supportive of this budget as well. I appreciate all the work that went into it and in, recognition of the, chaotic budget process we had last year. There were so many revenue unknowns, and I recognize the challenges that we have, but I also want to recognize the work that was done to ensure that even with those revenue questions and uncertainties, we found a way to navigate that. And I am really happy to see that we are implementing the reserve for revenue shortfall as something that helps us be responsive and in terms of, how we budget. So I also think this budget has some good balancing factors to it. And so I am supportive of approving it.
Thank you. I will add that I am supportive of this budget. I feel like staff and the board have done a good job of getting to this point and putting together a budget that responds well to the upcoming year, especially knowing that there are ways you could handle the potential risks out there if you needed to handle those. I appreciated hearing what those strategies could be. And also knowing that the board will be monitoring and taking action during the year if needed, if we see things coming down the road. The one thing I feel like this budget doesn't do for me is it doesn't really set you up for FY26. And so what I would encourage you to do when you're thinking about your FY26 budget is think a little bit longer term rather than just about the next 12 months, and think about the risks that could be coming down the pike, and maybe have a reserve that would handle potential revenue shortfalls for 2 or 3 years rather than just one. And what that would help you with is giving you some time to make adjustments if you need to make adjustments. I'm always a proponent of having a little more time rather than facing a situation and having to start making cuts right away. So that's what having a reserve will help you do. So that would be my 2 cents to leave you with. But I really appreciate the work. And I know the staff is all relatively new, and I think you did a really good job putting this budget together. So I appreciate it. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend that the board approve this budget.
Here's the.
Oh, go ahead and thunder away.
No, I'm just joking around. There you go, right there.
Okay. The LCC Budget Committee will consider the proposed
To recommend.
recommendation. Okay, I see it now. The Lane Community College District Budget Committee approved the 24-25 fiscal year amended proposed budget as discussed by the Budget Committee for all funds totaling $305,094,246.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Michael second. Steve will second. Before we get to that discussion, I just wanted to give Dr. Bolger a chance if she wanted to say anything else before we got into the motion. So
Just thank you. I am incredibly grateful to this team for all the work that you did, and all the people who are not in this room who did work all along over the last several months. And thank you to the Budget Committee, the Board of Education, but also to our community budget committee members for your service. I really, really appreciate that.
thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Kevin Alltucker,
Aye.
Sue Kutsu George,
Aye.
Larissa Ennis,
Aye.
Mike Ister,
Aye.
Lisa Fragala,
Aye.
Steve Mattel,
Aye.
Amber Patterson,
Aye.
Ron Preisler.
Aye.
Okay, second motion? Do you want to do that, Steve?
Sure.
Okay.
I move that the Lane Community College District Budget Committee approve property taxes for the 2024-2025 fiscal year at the rate of 0.6191 per $1,000 of assessed value for the permanent rate tax levy and in the amount of $13,530,000 for the general obligation bond levies.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, let's do a roll call.
Kevin Alltucker,
Aye.
Sue Kutsu George.
Aye.
Larissa Ennis,
Aye.
Mike Ister,
Aye.
Lisa Fragala,
Aye.
Steve Mattel.
Aye.
Amber Patterson,
Aye.
Ron Preisler.
Aye.
Well, I think that's it then. Let's see, any additional items, Dr. Bolger?
No, I see on the agenda, it says future meeting dates. There are none. We'll see you next year.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, I guess we're adjourned early. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank
Thank you, Chair. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.